Welcome to Books and Things with Tom. Today's guest is Larry Davis, and we're going to be discussing a new series that I'm starting this week. And we're going to be discussing the Denison Farm Market and try to give you some ideas of how the farmers work, what the farmers do. And we're going to kick it off here with Larry Davis from the Davis Farm on Greenhaven Road in Pawcatuck. And it also happens to be one of the oldest running farms in the country.
We are the oldest farm in the nation.
The oldest farm.
Yes.
Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. You're, what's 1650?
1654.
1654. And it's been continuous ever since.
It's been in the Davis family, starting with the Stantons, the original, and then the Davises married in 1760. Our original farm, we originally landed in what's now Miller Place, Long Island, where there's still a bit of the Davis family farm and orchard still there, although it's certainly much smaller than it used to be. But anyway, we came over, we the Davises came over and did business with the Stantons, which was a trading post at that time. And one of the Davis boys married the end of the line Stanton, and came in and took over the farm, I believe, in somewhere around 1760 to maybe 70, 60 to 70.
Now, produce has changed, obviously, from the stuff that maybe your grandfather had even.
Farming changes quite often. Grandfather used to say that he felt that through his time running the farm that he thought agriculture changed about every 25 years. And he started with milking cattle by hand, taking produce. He had the last raw milk route in the state of Connecticut up through, I believe, until 1968. In his early days, he used to start milking at around 3:30 in the morning, would then bottle the milk. It would be taken by horse and buckboard down to the river, rode across the river where there'd be another horse and buckboard that was kept on the other side of the river over in Avondale. And like I said, that horse and buggy buckboard would be ready for delivery, and they'd row the produce across the river for the summer season at Watch Hill. And then once a week or so, they would come back and would prepare and split maybe 100 chickens that would be iced out of the ice house that they put up through the winter. And then that would be rowed across the river and taken back down. So that basically you marketed your produce where you could, and at that point in time, Watch Hill was a prime area for fresh produce, even back in the 30s and 40s and before. Certainly through his tenure, he had to survive and get through 2 world wars, a depression. He had a lot of issues to navigate through, and very lucky that in a time through the Depression when a lot of farms and a lot of businesses went under because they were invested in the market at that time, the grandfather did not do that. And probably for that reason and his conservatism that we still have a farm to work with today.
Yeah.
Then coming up through my father, we went from milking by hand and all the work being done by horses with my grandfather. We didn't have a tractor until 1968. I remember that whenever you'd get sent and you needed more horsepower, you got sent to the horse barn to put more harnesses on and then went back to the field. So it was very much Amish style, I suppose, at that point in time. But then Dad came in and took over, and instead of bottling the milk and delivering that to town, it was shipped to what was then Consumers Dairy in bulk.
Oh, yeah.
Grandfather had Guernseys. My father particularly liked his Ayrshires, which I had as well when we were still milking cattle when I came in. Then Dad started a lot with the produce, perhaps a bit more than my grandfather, shipping wholesale to various wholesale markets, whether Hartford, New London, and then distributing locally here in Pawcatuck and Westerly. And then in later years, started going to farm markets when agriculture had changed again, that it was more farm to table than it was farm to supermarket.
Now, you used to have I'm thinking down at the farm where people could go there and stand. at the farm?
We, sort of. We never really put up a stand. There was an honor box sometimes at the end of the driveway that my father would have had. When I came in and took over and started in with the horses and the hay rides and the cider mill, I then had a little bit more of our products available right there on site, although all of that has changed, and I now prefer the farm markets. My primary product right now is hay, and still keeping the produce going. It's difficult to do both at the same time because they both need your undivided attention at about the same time on the calendar.
Yeah.
Around the 20th of June, when you ought to be putting up your first cutting, your strawberries or your asparagus need to be picked. Being perishables, that brings its own headache that it has to be taken care of in a timely fashion. So hay and produce at the same time are difficult, but we've managed to find a balance for what we can do.
Now, I know basically what the difference is, but the difference between regular hay and salt marsh hay.
Okay, regular hay is for feed, whether cattle, horses, farm animals. Those varieties take there's a lot of different varieties, whether you're into the alfalfas, which have a higher protein, which also requires a specific soil, which I do not have. So I don't raise alfalfa. I raise upland legumes, which is orchard grass, timothy, and clover, which my heavy, poorly drained soil down on the flats on the river, as our farm's laid out, produces timothy very nicely. It doesn't like alfalfa. Now, when you come over into the salt marsh, it is generally considered to be a seedless mulch, which sounds nice, but really, if you think about it a little bit, really can't be true, because if it doesn't have a seed, how does it reproduce? How does it grow?
True.
What the difference is that marsh grass will only grow in a marsh soil. It will not grow in an upland soil. Likewise, clover will not grow in a salt marsh bog. So it's not that it's seedless, it's that the seed won't grow in the soil that you put it on.
Now, I know from reading history and different books that I read, back in the day, a couple hundred years ago, when they were giving out land, the farmer got some land, even if it was a small portion, of salt hay.
Of the 5
Salt marsh
varieties of grasses that grow in a salt marsh, 2 are or can be used for feed for cattle. 3 they don't. The other 3 they don't really like. Which is really part of the reason why my family originally landed and stayed where they did. Pretty much when they got off the boat, the marsh hay was there, readily available. You didn't have to seed it or plant it, nor did you have to fertilize it. That was taken care of through the nutrients in the water and the soils, in the tide rather. So the soil was rejuvenated and fertilized by what was in the water. So it was there. It was ready to go. It was an easy crop that was ready to feed.
Yeah, because I know they supposedly made the farm worth more money to have that salt marsh.
Probably at that point in time,
And
because of the availability of the feed.
Yeah.
I would imagine if you're also around those salt marshes, you probably also had availability of riverfront, river travel.
Yeah.
That if you didn't take it and put it on the train or haul it by horse, maybe you put it on a barge and it went somewhere. So there's a number of possibilities that may have made that land worth more.
Now, I know that you grow a lot of produce. What does your day in the summertime consist of? What time do you get up?
In the summertime, there really aren't enough hours of daylight in the course of the day. I'm not really traditional agriculture where you would think of, you'd start at 4 o'clock in the morning and head for the barn and start milking, because we don't do that any longer. So basically, if the sun is coming up and it's gray in the summertime, we're moving. If I'm putting up hay, which usually I am, I could be mowing at any point in time, anything after dinner and before breakfast, just because I need to get all of the sunshine. You really do have to make hay when the sun shines. I really do need all of the time that the sun is up for curing that hay. I don't have a lot of help, and so I need to I need to really put in the extra hours to get the hay, to get it on the ground, because hay, if it's green, is worth money, and if it's brown and it's burned out and it's gone by, it's really not.
Yeah.
So there's really, you know, if you've got some dry stock or some cattle to feed or some beef cattle, you know, if you've got a little dust in your hay or it's browned out or a little late cut, you can still do something with it like that. I don't have the cattle, and so everything that I sell is for stables. I need a high quality bale of hay, and therefore every bale needs to be perfect and it needs to be green.
Now, a couple of years ago, you bought a monster machine to do all the work, most of the work.
Well, that starts with changing from the horse-drawn mowers over to the discobines that we have today that also condition the hay and crimp it and allow the moisture. The faster you get the moisture out of the hay, the quicker it dries, the quicker it cures, and the greener that it is. Humidity here on the East Coast and with us here on the shoreline, humidity is a problem. Whereas you get back into Western Connecticut, up into New York State, and out in the Midwest where there's very little humidity, their hay dries much greener than ours does. We just have to manage that moisture that's in the air. That's just for cutting. Then, of course, you ted and you shake it out, and you continuously turn the bottom over so that it comes to the surface and then is dried in a uniform manner. And then I recently went from the old side delivery baler, the more traditional baler that you would think of, that's where the pickup head is offset, is to where now we have inline balers where you just drive over top of the row and it flips the windrow right into the baler. It's a straight shot. I love it. It's nice to, the old baler was 30 years old, and it's nice to jump into the technology that's the same century that you're in.
And it's quick.
It's very quick.
I watched you down there where you got two guys standing on the carriage in the back, or the wagon in the back, and they got to work like hell.
It is quick. I like to get 4 to 5 bales a minute.
Wow.
Onto the wagon.
Yeah.
Put on a load of hay, about 120 bales. Put it on in 30 minutes or less.
Now let's compare that to what your father used to do. And pile it up on a...
Sure. Going to take me back to a tough time.
Oh, my.
Back in the day of grandfather, and even through with my father for a number of years, hay was put up loose with the big tine forks that come down out of the loft on a track. Used to be a horse attached to the single tree that was attached to the rope out on the other end, and that hay would come off the wagon and go up into the peak and hit the trip and would go flying into the barn, and you'd pull the trigger and down it would go, and then of course you had to have somebody in there with a fork and tramping around in that 90 to 100 degree heat with a pitchfork stomping around in there to mow it away. The only thing I would say about that was that you really could put the hay up a little greener than we can, because it didn't compact quite so tightly in the mow.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, until the mid-late 70s, was still doing what we called the mowing away, up because I used to be the guy on the wagon that used to send it to him. So yeah, I've had, even for my age, I've had a little too much time with some of the old antique ways than I'd care to.
Yeah, because I've seen pictures of those. The hay piled on the wagon's got to be 15 feet high.
Came up off of a hay loader, still had to mow it and came up in a windrow. But the old hay loaders that you just drove over the row and it put it onto the wagon. And then with a pitchfork, you'd have to place it and build the load of hay. And you had to build those loads of hay correctly, otherwise they just open up and slide off. It wasn't just as simple as, yelling go ahead and all of a sudden it jumped on the wagon for you. There really was an art form to it.
Yeah. Now, you think about, and I can compare it to women in the kitchen, today's work and the days when your grandfather was running it, and how much work it was. And I'm sure it was very labor intensive.
Well, we'd like to think that we're more efficient now.
But you still don't have that much free time.
No, I mean...
That hasn't changed.
Time management Well, it's not just unique to farming. It's about daily life. It's about probably whatever, if you had I'm going to call it a normal job because I've never really had one. I've been the farm all of my life. So it's about time management and efficiency.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. And I know you get up early, you go to bed late. Not too late because you got to get up early.
It is. Well, I did in '78 when I left college. I went to college for 2 years, and Dad was having a difficult time at the farm, being all alone and having very little help. So in '78, I left school, November of '78. I left school at Central Connecticut, and I came home to work on the farm, and I've never left.
And but you're doing a great job with it. It's looking good, and it's.
We're still there.
Yeah, and you got the museum coming.
Museum's doing very well.
Yeah.
Very well. The funding's coming in. We've actually getting hammered a nail. This year, 2015 is fully funded. We're looking now, just have received a grant from the state of Connecticut, a matching grant for $75,000. This year's construction budget will be around $250,000, and we've already got, in rough numbers, maybe $150,000 to $200,000 committed for 016.
Wow.
So we're very lucky to have that, but it's taken a number of years to get the paperwork done, set up the 501c3, and to get some funding rolling, because grants you might apply this year, but you won't find out until next year.
Yeah.
So grants are good, but they may not be quick. So we're finally out of the paperwork phase and into the hammer and nail phase, and we're very happy with what we've got going.
That's great, because it's going to be beautiful when it's done.
When we decide to what period we're going to restore to, we originally thought that perhaps we've got 10 rooms in the house. Thought that perhaps we'd do each room in a certain period, and then as we started, well, not tearing, but refurbishing and taking things apart and seeing what's in the house, we're finding that the architecture inside, we think we may be an early first period undiscovered home, which we're still waiting on some dendrochronology to tell us exactly when the difference between the two houses, the 1670 and the 1760 addition, as to exactly when those dates were done. But as we see the architecture, we're thinking that perhaps we won't go to what we refer to as a dusty, velvet-roped museum. We may stay as a teaching museum and leave much of it open for study. We haven't made up our mind as to that yet, and what we're going to do for educational programs. We're still in the, if we don't have a solid shell and we don't keep the old house from falling down like a house of cards, we'll really have nothing to restore to.
Yeah.
So right now it's about pointing the foundation, replacing the sills, the sheathing, getting into the floor joists, into the second floor up into the attic, and getting that done, and making sure that the roof is intact. So right now we're about shoring up and making solid the shell. Then we can worry about what we're going to restore to and what period.
That's great. It's definitely going to be worth it. Now, I know you have products like potatoes and onions and beets and zucchinis and winter squash and summer squash and everything else. But one of the things you're most famous for is the corn, the Indian corn and the cornmeal.
Our cornmeal is fast becoming one of our certainly our most recognizable product, but also really growing, with no pun intended, really an up-and-coming part of our business. The cornmeal and the polenta, which polenta is just a heavier grind of cornmeal, and this is the corn that we got pretty much from the Indians when we got here. We've had it for well over 300 years. It's the Narragansett variety. It's an 8-row corn. It's slightly longer than what you might think of as for sweet corn. Yeah. Your regular sweet corn is a 10-row corn, and that by rows I mean the rows that are on the cob.
Okay.
Now, our grinding corn, there are different varieties of it. There's a Narragansett, which is an 8-row. There's a Wampanoag, which is a brown corn, can be a 10-row. We also have a 12-row, and we're not sure if that is Native American or if that's European. I'm sure my father could tell you, but I don't have that piece of history. He still does, and maybe I should ask him.
That's probably a good idea.
But at any rate, the cornmeal is very nice for breads, muffins, coating on fish, scallop. The polenta is kind of a version. If you've never had it before, don't really know what it is, just think grits.
Yeah.
Just think of a northern grit.
Yeah.
You'd still boil it, you'd still make it up, and then basically the recipe is everything, maybe even including the kitchen sink. I mean, people throw in vegetables, cheese, you cool it, you slice it. I've even had it at a wild game cooking class where the polenta was made, put on a cookie sheet, chilled, and then cut in strips, then deep fried as a polenta fry.
Whoa.
I was a little skeptical when it first came out, but I was very pleasantly surprised, and something at some point in time I'd probably try. But we're still doing the corn. We haven't missed a crop since we got there, and I still have the varieties.
Yep. And of course you have sweet corn.
We have various greens, root crops, row crops, sweet corn, red, white potato, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, 4 varieties of lettuce, a kale. I planted peas and radishes today, a little late, but I planted them. The greenhouses have been going good. In there are the tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, all in seedlings and about in 2 to 2.5 inches in height right now. And they'll go out into the field in a good month.
Wow.
And be ready.
I know I got a couple of other subjects I want to cover. I don't know what kind of time we got left. Denison Farm Market.
Denison Farm Market. I am the market master for the Denison Farm Market that is sponsored by the Denison Society. It's held on Sundays from 12 to 3. We open and start the first Sunday in June, which I believe is the 7th. We generally run through the last Sunday in October. However, the 1st of November is a Sunday. We may run through the 1st of November. Then we take a little break and come back and open up again the Sunday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I have a lot of vendors, a dozen of 14, perhaps at this point in time. We've got two bakeries. One's a little more traditional. The other does a lot with breads, cookies, and cakes and pies. Purity Farm uses organic methods, has a lot of veggies, greens, and fruit. There are our orchard vendor, come in with apples, peaches, pears, berries. Lebanon, I can't think of exactly what, Jim Jahota comes in with honey and maple syrup.
Oh, yeah.
Kate McGarry has soaps and oils. We have a cheese vendor. Lori Zedek comes in with her wool products from her alpacas. Something always strikes me funny about that. You get in a conversation with her about her animals and she calls them her donors, her wool donors. So I don't know, it just kind of strikes me a little bit. We do have a lemonade stand for in case you get a little bit thirsty.
A good idea.
And then there's Studio Farm and Stony Ledge Farm, which are the Wingates. Come in with a lot of greens, veggies, some preserves. They have their own meat. And Ed Leonard grills their own hamburgers for sale, which are phenomenal.
I'm going to have the Wingates on next week, and he just told me we got 5 minutes to go here. We're going to do the Wingates next week. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, we got about 3 minutes to talk about it, is Ducks Unlimited.
I serve nationally on our Conservation Programs Committee for Ducks Unlimited. Ducks Unlimited is often confused with a hunting organization, which is not true. There is nothing in our mission statement that has anything about gun rights, hunting opportunity. We have nothing about guns. We are the world's largest conservator of wetlands. Approximately 13.2 million acres to date since we were started in 1937. We conserve, restore, We put easements over top of ground. We're right now have a focus on the prairie pothole region through the U.S. and up through into Canada. We also have a lot of work that we do, and a primary focus area is in the boreal forest, which is the world's largest contiguous wetland that circles the Arctic.
Wow.
And we're in a memorandum of understanding and working with the Pew Family Foundation in Philadelphia, and working with a lot of industry, logging, mineral folks, and using best management practices in the boreal forest, which also produces an awful lot of waterfowl. We certainly make no excuse for the fact that perhaps 90% of our members are hunters. But again, we have nothing to do with hunting rights. We were started in 1937 by Roosevelt and were born out of the great Dust Bowl days when there were no water, and certainly came to a few people's attention that thought that if there was no water, there would be no waterfowl. And basically that was the birth of Ducks Unlimited.
I'll be darned. Well, it's something that, until I met you, that I never heard of it before. And I'm sure there's a lot of our audience out there that hasn't.
You can go right on to ducks.org, and you can read all about us and see the work we do. And this year we will conserve 200,000 acres, right on target for our 5-year plan, which is 1 million acres in the next 5 years.
Wow. Now, if you want any information on the Davis Farm or the Denison Farmers Market or Ducks Unlimited, you can get the information right there. It's contact Larry Davis and Larry Ducks and Bucks at Comcast.net, or contact me if you can't read that, and be happy to get you in touch with him. I hope you come down and visit the Denison Farm Market. Next week we'll have the Wingates on from the
Stony Ledge and Studio.
Stony Ledge Studio, and his daughter's coming on the week after that. Every week we're going to have different farm vendor from the Denison Farm Market. The show will start at 9:30. We'll still have my usual books and things at 9 o'clock, but then at 9:30 we'll do the farm market. We want to let everybody know what's going on in the farmers market, so get down there and get some fresh produce, no GMOs. I want to wish a very happy birthday to Margaret Benoit, whose birthday is today. I'd sing it to her, but I don't want to lose my audience. Spring is here. There's a lot of motorcycles on the road, and please watch out for them. Also, to the bikers, spring is here. Watch out for the cars. And apparently they can't see each other. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But the next week, as I say, I'm also going to have Joe Sanda on, who has written a book about his uncle, Jim Henry. He had taped Jim a number of times before he died, and he wrote a book about all the conversations. And he actually collected all the information, and he had his cousin write the book. So they're going to be on next week, and we're going to be talking about Jim Henry again. Jim Henry, we're not going to let him pass away and be forgotten. We'll keep bringing him back. And next time you're in Groton, please stop in and see our studio, SEC TV, and it's located between Benny's and the post office. And we're nonprofit, and so if you'd like to drop a check off, we take that too. Anything we can do. Anyway, I thank you for watching, and you can contact me at my address. You should be reading. Cuddle up with a good book. I'll see you next week. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.